Number 1. The Deer. I haven't had a car in a very long time. I live in a town, in a rather rural area. There's no public transportation in the town. Everything is pretty accessible by foot, though, if you're willing to take a walk. I guess it doesn't matter if I'm willing, as I really have no choice but to walk. The other thing about the town I live in are the deer. There are tons of deer all around. It's not unusual to see a cluster of them running across the street at one time. Several times, when I was walking home at night, I would come across one who freezes in its tracks and looks at me the way they do. I can get a little close to them then, and that's really neat. However, they are still deer, and they'll always run away if I get too close. I work in a pizza place, and no, this isn't a pizza delivery story. Remember, I have no car. It closes at 11 p.m. every night, and it's on the opposite side of town that I live on, so I always have close to an hour walk home at night once I get off work. The town also dies around 9 p.m., so it's rare to see anyone else walking. On this night, not only were there no pedestrians, but there weren't many cars either. I wasn't really scared walking home. I'd done it 1,000 times. But it was very foggy this night. It was hard to see too far in front of me. Once I got out of the town and into the residential area, it was even more difficult. There weren't as many streetlights in that neighborhood, and the fog just thickened. It was when I got deeper into the residential area that I saw something shine in the fog. It was a bit off the other side of the street. The way it shone in the fog made me automatically think I saw deer eyes. I wasn't sure though, so I decided to move in closer for a better look. It definitely looked like there was a deer standing there. As I moved in for a closer look, I realized something. The eyes were definitely too high up off the ground for this to be a deer. I mean, it looked like one, but if it was, it would be the largest and tallest deer I, or anyone else for that matter, had ever seen in their entire lives. You know how you're in fog, but it's harder to see things that are further away from you? However, when you get close, you can finally make them out? Well, the closer I got, the more I could tell what I was looking at. And yeah, it was definitely a deer head, but it wasn't on a deer body. I quickly found out that there was a man standing there in the fog. He was completely naked, except for a deer mask that he was wearing on his head. And he was looking right at me. He was holding something in his hand, but I couldn't really tell what it was. Startled, I almost fell back onto the ground. He didn't move though. He just stood there, staring at me. After a few moments, I just figured he was some weirdo and decided to go home. I walked a few steps away, and immediately heard footfalls behind me. I looked back over my shoulder, and suddenly the guy was following me. Though that was all I needed to tell me, I had to get away as far as possible. I took off and booked it home. I couldn't tell if he was following me, and I didn't look back. I had my keys in my hand, and when I got to my house, I quickly unlocked the door and ran into it. Peeking out the window, he was standing on the street, looking at the house. He stayed like that for about 20 seconds, turned, and left. I reported it to the police, but they thought I made it up. Number 2. The Bridge. This is a little hard to explain. It happened to me when I was 17 years old. I was in the drama club at school. We were doing a play in the fall. Sometimes, after rehearsal was over, me and a few friends would hang out in the hallway talking. Often, we'd end up getting out of the building very late. I didn't live in the same neighborhood as any of my drama friends did. I had to walk out of town and across a bridge. The bridge didn't cover a river or anything like that, though. It actually was part of the road, and it covered train tracks. The area surrounding these tracks It's a very dense forest. It's always been a little creepy to walk over the bridge at nighttime. The night that it was the creepiest to walk the bridge was in November, when I was 17. I had already stayed late at school and parted ways with my friends. I was looking forward to getting home and getting myself something to eat. Of course, I was a 17-year-old guy, so I liked eating. By this time, the town was deserted. I always found it weird how that happens. It's like everything disappears. Perhaps like no one really wants to be outside after dark. And that's what this was like. I was walking up the road towards the bridge when I thought I heard something. It almost sounded like somebody was in pain or something. It was coming from down the side of the road, in the forest. Still up ahead of me, though. At first, I thought it was just a small animal that was making some weird noise. But the closer I got to the bridge, the more it definitely sounded like a human being. And it definitely sounded like he was in pain or something. I was really freaked out at this point. I was wondering if I should do something. But really, I had no idea what I could do. When I was crossing the bridge, I could hear the noises very clearly. It was definitely a person, and he was screaming or something. But it wasn't coming from under the bridge like I had previously thought. It was coming from out in the forest. I could now hear what sounded like some sort of whispering sounds and some breaking sounds. And each time I heard one of those, it was followed by the definite sound of someone crying or screaming. The only way I can describe it is if you've ever seen the Blair Witch Project, and after the character Josh went missing, they would hear him screaming at night. It was a lot like that. Now, before anyone questions why I didn't go in the woods to help, you have to know that I actually considered it. I thought I could help whomever that was and be a hero. But I wasn't sure what was happening. Maybe a gang of people were down there torturing some guy, and if I tried to help, I would end up being tortured too. I didn't know. I figured I would be more helpful getting home and calling the police. I tried to hurry, and that just scared me even more. The screaming sounds continued until I was out of earshot. When I got home and called the police, they went straight out and investigated it. Later on, they came by my house to take a statement. They had found a student from my high school, severely bloody and beaten deep in the forest. He had apparently been taken there by 4 men and tormented. He survived, and the men were eventually arrested. I'm not trying to sound self-centered here when I say that I often imagine what would have happened if I had tried to help. There was no way I could have saved the guy, and I would have likely ended up beaten up too. And I just can't forget those awful wails of pain he made. Number 3. The Graveyard. When I was in high school, there was this guy named Phil, who was always a major jerk to me. I can't say he really picked on me. I wasn't a nerd or anything. I was actually relatively popular. But I also wasn't the type to fight back when people treated me poorly. So I think he was always trying to get a rise out of me. You know, when people aren't able to annoy you, all they do is try harder. There was this one night where I was walking home late from work. My parents let me work a job which I didn't get off until pretty late. On the way home, I used to always cut through this graveyard. It was a rather big one, full of tons of big monuments. I guess a lot of people would have been intimidated by walking through a graveyard, but I did it all the time, so it didn't bother me. So this happened around Halloween. Cliché, I know. I was working, and on the way home, I made my customary shortcut through the cemetery. After a short while, I began to hear voices. Not surprising, I suppose. It was close to Halloween, and people would hang out in graveyards. Anyhow, I walked by a monument and came face to face with Phil and a few of his friends sitting around and smoking pot. I froze in my tracks when I came face to face with them. Phil immediately stood up and walked over towards me. he made some comments about he and I not getting along, and that I would probably narc on them. I, of course, wouldn't have done that. I didn't care if they smoked pot. I did it myself. But they didn't believe me. Phil told his buddies that they should make sure that I didn't say anything. I didn't need to be hinted at twice the run. I ran, and the guys came after me. Obviously, they weren't too stoned to not care. I just booked to the end of the graveyard in an attempt to get out and get home. Unfortunately, I turned around to look at them one time, and like an idiot, I tripped and fell over a gravestone. I turned over and was face to face with Phil and his buddies. I grimaced and prepared myself for a beating. Phil looked up, looking past me. His eyes suddenly grew very wide. He motioned to his two buddies, who also looked up and suddenly looked very scared. All three guys then took off and ran very quickly away from me. Now, I was a bit relieved and then suddenly terrified. Anything that could make those three guys run away in fear was something that I had to be terrified of too. I slowly got up and forced myself to peek over my shoulder. There was something standing a bit far back from me, a tall, black, and really imposing figure. And I mean really huge. And he was carrying a damn chainsaw, and he was slowly walking towards me. I took off and booked out of the damn graveyard, and I didn't look over my shoulder, nor did I quit running until I was in my home. I'm not sure what it was, who it was. I'm not sure. It may have been a Halloween prank, but whatever it was enough to freak out the four of us, big time. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of the closing. Feel free to leave a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter by using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, email it to the address included in the description. In the meantime, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.